All right. Okay, cool. So today we're going to be going over this edit right here, which is basically people have been asking for tutorials, like quite a, quite a lot of people. So um, I wanted to give sort of a like general sort of a tutorial on how it's done and like some of the concepts I use to do um, to make this video, this edit. So essentially, I'm gonna kind of go through. This is not going to be a very polished tutorial. I'm gonna kind of just like go through basic concepts. I can do a more in-depth tutorial later on if you guys want that, but I just wanted to kind of explain how I do. I've had specific questions, so I'm gonna answer some of those questions. Um, we're gonna kind of just go in chronological order, so I'm just gonna start at the beginning. I want to preface as well. I literally didn't know how to use Fusion at this point, so I don't use Fusion at all in this edit. Which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing if you're trying to learn. But for all of my newer stuff, I use Fusion. But at this point, I just was too scared of Fusion, so I didn't touch it. By the way, if you don't know what Fusion is, it's this little thing down here, which is it just helps to. It's so much better. It's made my edits a lot better. But I didn't know how to use it at this point, so I didn't use Fusion. Anyways, that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Also, like, this is an absolute mess of a timeline, and this is not organized correctly, so please organize your timelines. Like, this is ridiculous, actually, really bad. But yeah, so I'm gonna start at the beginning. So these were all done. I basically just had the camera on a tripod here. Well, no, I didn't. I actually don't have a tripod with me in the U.S. right now, so I just had it on like a. It was on like a piece of wood or something. But I basically just recorded myself at 60 frames per second so I could slow it down. Um, just doing a bunch of random movements. And then I used Magic Mask, which is in here. I used Magic Mask to basically just mask myself out, or I just simply like added in a just like very simply just mask myself out like this um, in the color page. Again, use Fusion if you're gonna do this, but I think this is still works for me at this point. Um, but like literally, I just mask myself out, soften the edge a tiny bit, and then that's literally it. I use something called super slow mo, which is essentially where I slowed down my clips. That one was not slowed down. Hold up. I slowed down my clips down to about, this one's at 40%, which you can see in the back there. This guy right here. I also use speed ramping, which is just basically time remapping. But this was like a very simple way of doing that. But you can see it here. So I'm gonna explain quickly how I did this. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna hit Command R on your keyboard, or you can just hit retime controls. So right click and then hit retime controls, and then you're gonna basically go in here and you can add a speed point, and then you can change the speed. So what I did here is I basically just I added a speed point, changed it down to 50%, and then I went into my retime curve up here, and this one I purposefully made it sharp, which is interesting. But usually what you can do is you can come in here and you can hit this curve button here, and what this does is it'll basically smooth out. It'll smooth out your speed curves, which is going to give it that sort of fluid motion that a lot of this edit has, and that's I think speed ramping and time remapping is one of the big things I used in this edit to make it have energy and sort of give it sort of that interesting like flair, which I think kind of makes it stand out. The way I did the upside down characters, it's pretty obvious. It's not complicated. I literally just did a mask and then flipped it. Just basically hitting here and just flipping, which is very simple. And then for my flicker transitions, you can see it here. To do my flicker transitions, I use basically two framers. So I'll basically come in and like, just for example, on this framer right here, um, I'll use one of two ways to do transitions. So when I do this type of thing, I'm basically going add again. I use Fusion now, but this is an easier way to do it. I just create two frames, I cut them up, and then I just basically increase the add here. So I'm just using add is basically something that's an adjustment in the composite layer. So if you go up to your video feed, you're gonna just hit add, and then you can basically just slowly transition into normal clip. And what it does, it creates. If you watch here, it just creates a fluid, really really fluid. It's super easy too. A very easy way to create a really fluid transition. And then here, when I do sort of these flickers, I keep it very simple. So basically, I just magic masked it out. Um, I basically brought the exposure way up so that it was just whited out. When I say bring the exposure way up, I just mean you go into your color page and you just drag this, crank it all the way up to the top so that the white is all the way up here. It'll just basically make everything white, and that's how you do the flickers. Add in a small Gaussian blur, which just gives it that kind of like blurry edge. Take your opacity and then just drag it. I just drag the opacity down a little bit, and then you get this transition. Just a really easy, really simple transition, but it just looks great. It just using that one frame just adds in a really nice little piece of detail. All these different things. I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory how I did this. It's basically just all timing and adding it all together. Think about how the music works with your stuff as well. So if if the music feels like it needs to be slower, slow things down. If it needs to be faster, speed it up. Another thing I did real quickly is I keyframed the movement of a pillar. So I actually masked out this pillar here, and then I just keyframed the movement from basically being far out, and then the keyframe movement just ends here. And then I did a simple flicker transition again here, which is the same exact thing I explained before, which is where I literally just masked it out, took the same mask, blew out, basically brought the highlights all the way up, and then used a single framer. When I say framer, it's just a single frame, and then that creates that really fast movement. And this flicker really drags you into the next section here. So I kind of go flicker, bam, right into here. So moving into the next section, I purposefully used this character here, and I'm pretty sure I speed ramped it. Yeah. So I basically speed ramped the movement of this character right here, of me. And what it does is the step sort of leads you into this next section. If you watch up here, the step leads you right into that. And same thing here, I did retiming. So I had it at 50%, which is slow-mo, and I moved it up to 400%. And that gives it a really interesting movement, right? It goes from super slow into super fast, just like that, bam. And then the step down happens just like that. And that leads us into the next section. So one of the ways I transition my clips, and people were asking like how I did this. I use darken. So darken and a Gaussian blur. So in your filters, you have a Gaussian blur. Gaussian blur is essentially just gonna soften out the image. And so what I did here is I basically just took darken. Darken's basically gonna just merge whatever you put in with the background, whatever's beneath it. So basically merging it with here. And then as you watch slowly, if you look up in the top over here, it's going to basically just slowly drop bam, 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 and then I'm there. So I use basically a three frame transition here. To do this, all you have to do is just basically take your reds. I can show you how to do it real quick. You just go up into here. You're going to select whatever you want. And in the color warper, you're going to just drag the point. So if you use your clicker here, select it, and then you're just going to drag your point towards red, and that's how I did that. But it just kind of gives it a really, if you watch real quick up here, it gives it a really interesting kind of transition. One of the big things to think about is maintaining the speed of the edit. So everything here happens really quickly, which is what gives it that illusion of, okay, like that happens really fast, right? So it feels like there's energy, and it feels like there's motion. So when we go here, bam, flicker in here. The way I did this is I literally just walked up in front of the camera, and then I basically just panned. So one of the big things people have been asking me is how I did the whips. So basically, how did I like whip the camera and do the transitions for the slides. At this point in my cinematography, I actually didn't know how to do Fusion. So I didn't use Fusion to do it. But what I did is I basically everything I do is an actual in-camera swipe. So here I literally took the camera and I panned it to the right with my hands, and then I just speed ramped the movement. So if you go in here, I just basically had it at 400%, so it just goes 400 and then it pans. You can see it just move like that. The way I made this super smooth is by using something called a 3D keyer. And what this does is it basically is just going, let me find the clip. It's just going in here. And so what I did is I went into here and I just click on this guy right here. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow you to basically select certain parts of the image. So bright parts, dark parts, whatever. You're going to click here, select it. And then what this is doing you're going to click add alpha output. And then you're going to connect the blue dot to this one. And that's going to basically make it show up. And then what this does is it just slowly brings it in. So if you watch here, as this kind of bam, 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 right? So I kind of have, this is another 3-frame transition. But it just really creates super fluid movement. So bam, it feels as though it's like just there. Like that, bam. And then I also created a small little flicker here where I used the same 3D mask. And then I just did the same thing where I took the whites, dragged the whites all the way up so that they were blown out. And then I just basically I did the same 3D key thing here. So I just 3D keyed it, select it, see, you can see the selection here. and then it only selects that part of the image, and I blew it out like that. Um, so these transitions here, people were asking me how I did this. These ones are actually very, very simple. So all I did basically was I'm using the same retiming for the speed retiming. I'm using a frame of like basically add and then just blur. Um, and then literally like I can't explain like how simple this is. Like nothing is happening here. Like this is all I did. So I just had the two things speed ramped. So here I have it at 800. You can see this down here. I had it at 800%, then down to 400, and then at 100. Um, and then if you go into the retime curves, I've basically smoothed out here. So this is what I talked about before. I purposefully left this one pretty sharp because I like the kind of the sharp transition there. But then I smooth this transition out into here, and then that obviously transitions into our next section. But that's how it literally like there's nothing else here. It's just simply speed ramping two motions. So I just pan the camera to the right, pan the camera from the left to the right, and I just cut in the middle, speed ramp it, and it's done. A blur also helps. So I do the way I do my editing at this point is I do adjustment clips with blur on them. So this is a lens distortion one. Again, name your stuff. I did not name these, which is which is just horrible. Yeah, so here I have a Gaussian blur. And so what I did is I just brought the Gaussian blur up as it transitions. So you can see here the transition point is here, and I brought the Gaussian blur up as the transition happens. To do this, you're basically gonna just like you're gonna have your Gaussian. So you're gonna make an adjustment clip, which is over here. The way I did this is I basically do it over the entire image, over the entire video, so that I can just you see I like bring up the blur here, and then bring it back down. And usually you want to bring up the blur when you're transitioning, or when you feel as though it needs something to sort of like. So here I brought the blur up, and then it transitions nicer, bam. And yada yada. And then so to do this, you're basically just gonna click on this little point here. Every time you click on a point, you're creating a keyframe. To access keyframes, you're gonna just click on this button here, or you can go here, and then click where is it? Oh no, you want me to do that? Just basically click this button here. It's gonna allow you to access the keyframes, and then you can again same thing here. You can smooth them out by selecting a point, and then clicking smooth in here, and then you can obviously adjust the smoothness of each keyframe by zooming in like this, and then you can obviously touch individual sections of it. But that is another way to create smoothness is by using blur and then glow as well, which I'll touch on. So I hope that's explained well enough. I also used glow, which should be up. No, should be. I think it's here. No, that's blur. Sorry. No, I don't know. Anyways, but essentially, I'm doing the same process, but just with glow. So I'm using glow to basically just. The glow is sort of just hiding some of the transitions. You can use deep glow or normal glow, and you can access those in here by searching up glow, or you can access it in the color panel by going into here and then searching up glow. I don't think deep glow is in now, so deep glow you can only access. That's okay. Anyways, so moving on, then we're gonna move into this section. So yeah, transitioning. Also, I use a lot of stabilization, so I add a shake basically over the top of everything. And for my shake, where's the shake? Sorry, this is such a mess. God, here it is. So I add a camera shake in here, over the top of everything, and I make sure everything is stabilized after adding in, the camera shake. Again, camera shake can be found, in here. And so this is also where I keyframe all my movements. So I use some zooms. I do the same thing. So again, when you're keyframing movement, come up here, click on this top one, which is going to basically just affect everything beneath it. And then I'm just keyframing the movement. So I'm zooming in or I'm moving left to right using position X and position Y, and vice versa. So, and then this is going to allow me to, you can obviously increase the sharpness or the slowness or whatever. And then I'm also adding the shake. And so this is how I keyframe all my movements. So you can see all the movement coming in here if you look at these keyframes here. So this is zooming in, zooming back out, then I'm zooming in here, right? So like, for example, you can see the zoom in there. That's happening through that. And then I'm coming back out. A subtle zoom in here that swaps like that. And then a big zoom out here as it kind of pulls out, like that. And yeah, that just gives it lots of energy and kind of gives it that motion, which I think is what is very appealing. people were asking how I did the transitions, these transitions right here. So essentially, what I did is I had basically 3 clips, and you can see again here how I've basically like I've just basically speed. So I've basically time like remapped, basically speed ramped each clip into each other. So here you can see is a speed ramp there, which is causing that shake. Um, and then I've used a single frame here of basically a 3D masked out version of this previous clip. So that's that same thing I mentioned before, the 3D mask. And so what I did is I basically selected my highlights, and then put that over top. And so that's what's creating that really smooth. You can see that just cuts really smoothly together, just like that. And that's what kind of gives it that like that, bam. So if you watch up here up here, this is giving that really smooth transition there. And the speed ramp is basically creating shake, because of the movement in the camera. So that's just, and then bam, moves into that. Again, this is just personal preference and like playing around with the timings and things like that. So you're just gonna have to mess around with it until it works for you. Same thing here, just sort of like I literally just speed ramped each clip into each other. Moved in closer, speed ramped it. Very, very simple. I think this is just a slight, yeah. So and then I had a Gaussian blur as a 2-framer here, just to kind of increase the smoothness again. And then it's just so smooth. It's so easy and so smooth, so simple. One of the biggest tips I think for especially beginners is using the camera as if when you're filming things, think about the edit in the camera. So as you're filming it, think about what you want it to look like and how you want it to feel, and carry that into the edit. Don't try and do everything in the edit. There's a reason that we have hands that can move cameras around, and we're able to move different things into different places, right? Because that is sort of that's just as strong as an edit, right? Like these, I swear, probably 80% of these movements are happening in camera in this edit, which is, I think a lot of people don't think about that, but it's such an easy way to increase the quality of your edits, especially when you lack editing skill, which is something that I didn't have crazy editing skill at this point in my like career. I don't know, it's probably not the right word. Anyways, so then we're kind of moving into this. This transition here is actually pretty simple. So I just basically did. I love using the 3D mask. You'll see me using it all the time. But what I did here is I just 3D masked out this light object here, and I literally just stretched it, and then added Gaussian blur, which is directional blur. So directional blur is really good for showing motion. So here I added directional blur right here. You can see me using directional blur here, which is just giving it that, if you look at the frames, it's giving it that sort of that look there, which I think is what really gives it that motion. Here's same thing, so you can watch it. I just literally took the light after 3D keying it, and then just stretched it frame by frame into the next clip, and it just turns out very fluid. Again, just like you have to just play around with it and kind of like see how good, but I think that it just flows so nicely. And purposefully I've used basically, so this motion, the light is moving from right to left here, and then my next clip is also speed ramping from right to left. So it's kind of this motion of the light is sort of playing into the next motion. So you can see that at bam, and that's why that's so smooth. Bam, like that, and it just kind of comes out really, really nicely. So you can see we're moving from right to left here. Again, same thing, speed remapping here like this. So just like speed ramping 800 into 100 and then out back into 800. And then I assume I've also smoothed it out. Oh, it's funny. I thought I smoothed it out, but a lot of these I didn't even smooth out, which is really interesting. But yeah. Also, another big thing, stabilization. So using stabilization can really help. So that's kind of what gives it that like interesting locked off feeling here. Okay, anyways, into the next section. Let me make sure I'm still recording. I am. Okay. So for this section here, I basically took a shutter, like a slow shutter camera movement, and I basically just dragged that in over top, and then I've used the 3D key again here, and just 3D keyed out this certain part of the image, and then that transitions really smoothly into the next. So if you watch it frame by frame, using some Gaussian blur as well. So there's Gaussian blur here. Sorry, not Gaussian blur. directional blur here, which is sort of dragging it into the movement. So you can see I've purposely panned the directional blur so that it goes towards at 140 degrees, so that it goes towards the next movement, just like that. And it gives it that sort of really smooth, fluid transition, just like that. It feels really good. Yeah, and then what else? Yeah, that just yeah, it's really cool. I haven't looked at this in a while. It's fun to look at it. Here basically just very simple. Like I again use the camera here, so I literally just pan. You can see me just pan up, and then I just speed ramped it again. So you can see obviously repeated sort of repeated things that I do over and over and over again to kind of like do these things. So at 400 and then into 100, I assume I will have smoothed this out. I don't think I knew how to smooth out keyframes at this point. It doesn't matter. But I smoothed this out here. Anyways, so that's basically just dragging it into that, and then bam. Just comes in really smooth, like so, just like that. And then we're going to drag it out into the next section. So for this next section, again, same thing, use the camera movement. So here, I actually, again, pan from left to right, speed ramp that up to 800%. You can see it sort of slowly move away. It actually could be a bit smoother, but it's okay. Used a Gaussian blur 2-frame here, I believe. Yeah, Gaussian blur 2-frame here to kind of smoothly transition that. These clips are literally me running around, like, spinning in a fucking circle, which is pretty random. And I just, like, recorded the lights above me. And then same thing here. I'm pretty sure I just keyframe the movement. So 100 into 400. And you can see it kind of go from 100 into 400 to the next clip, and that's what gives it that smooth bam. See that? It's so simple. It's honestly so simple. Into 75, slow it down again, talking about like speed, and then back out just like that. Some of these frames I've added in little tiny frames to just sort of, so for like this is some low shutter stuff. If you want to know how to do low shutter, search up how to do low shutter video, and it'll show you how to do that. But I've just added in single, like, kind of 2 frames here to just, like, add a bit of eye candy, just make it a bit more interesting, help transition in between, and that's literally it. It's very, very simple, not complicated at all. Here, again, I've used, so you can see I'm using the motion that I just naturally have, right? So this right here is me speeding this back up to 400, and you can see it sort of slowly pan over. I'm using that pan as the motion to lead me into the next clip. Just like so, like that. So I'm also using some directional blur here, a progressive directional blur, and then I'm also using an extra camera shake here just to add a bit more motion. Here I just literally just dragged up the motion scale really, really high. It's like super, super high, and that's basically it. It's again, like, very, very simple, not complicated at all. These ones up here are all just flicker addition, which is just giving it a bit of flicker. Very, very simple. Like, I just added, I think, just to give it a bit more energy through that section. And then these ones again are just camera shake. I just thought it needed more. Again, this is very amateur. I didn't know how to properly do camera shake at this point in my editing, but I just basically layered it over, and that's what gives it that sort of interesting feeling, or like sort of gives it a lot of energy, which I really like. Make sure we're still recording. Here, essentially, like, again, using the Gaussian blur and then just slowly panning out, so that kind of goes into it. The way I did these walking sections is, again, it's just speed ramping. So if you go into here, you can see it. I go from 250 into 50%, which is giving it that slow-mo, which I love. And then it goes very quickly for 2 frames into 400%. And that's what's going to give you that. And again, I assume I smoothed it out. Yeah. And then we're just smoothing out our keyframes by clicking here, going into retime curve, and then pressing on our point, and then clicking here. Very, very simple stuff. Looks great, super simple. And then I used a small, like, basically glow. Again, super easy, just a 3-frame transition. Just using add. So I go from add at 24% into 51%, and then back out to 35%. Super, super simple. And it just creates a really, really nice, super easy transition. That looks great. I think one of the big things, like, this is not complicated. Like, what I'm doing is not complicated. It takes time, and I spend a lot of time doing this, but this is not super complicated stuff. It's stuff that you can very, very well do, and it's very achievable. So all this stuff here, again, same thing as I did in the previous section. I'm just masking it out. The way I do the movement is by, if I were to turn off these, it'd be a still section, right? So when you're doing all these movements, you're able to do crazy things, and then you're able to apply the movement in post afterwards as adjustment clips, which is something I still use in my most recent stuff. Same thing here. These are all I've already been over how I do these transitions, so they're not complicated. Basically just like coming in here, using an add transition. Where is it? An add here, and then going from add at 100 down to 18, giving you that smooth sort of roll off that just as two framers. Very, very simple. Okay, then people asked how I did this transition. I'll go frame by frame. I think this will help. But essentially, I used a 3D mask here where I masked myself out, kind of like dragging it in. I'll just go frame by frame. So here, same thing with an add, where I just added this in here. And then I used the same transition, a bit of movement here, a slight blur here. And then so simple, like it's really not complicated at all. And then bam, it kind of just pulls out. And the way we do that pull out is by just slowly bringing down the blur, like so. So going from darken down to, yeah, it's super simple, just like that. And then this is all just speed ramp stuff at the end here. So this was super simple, just all speed ramped, just like that. And then I just basically speed ramped these clips. I used a little, like, I slowly brought down this blur here for normal, so I just to kind of slowly transition, oh, what did I just do? Slowly transition out that. So if you look up here, you can kind of see it just slowly, really subtly blurs out as I transition. But that's literally it. And then same thing, just speed ramped it up from 400 down from 400 into 124, and then that's it. Very, very simple stuff. If you have any more questions, hit them up, and I can do a way more in detail tutorial. But honestly, like, I'd love to do some more tutorials on my newer stuff because I've learned a lot. I'm gonna be working on my newer video is gonna be very similar to this one, so I hope you guys fuck with the style for this one. So I'm gonna be doing that. I'm gonna go out and film tonight, and then probably start editing that. Yeah, if you want more tutorials on certain videos, DM me and I will make as many tutorials as you guys want. The only thing I want to go over real quick is just using your keyframe. So like using adjustment clips over the top. So like, for example, right here, I think I went over this before, but this is my Gaussian blur, which is how I do all my blurs. And I do it in one place, which I think is really nice. Again, I mentioned that before. Same thing down here. This is, I assume this is the remap. Yeah, this is my camera shake where I'm doing all my movements. And that's sort of how I'm able to do these in such it looks really complicated, but it's not. Like everything here is just, I'm doing my movements here. Bam, zooming in, zooming back out, zooming in. Zooming back. So it's not complicated. Anyways, I hope you guys fucked with that. I'll quickly touch on the sound design, just because I think people were asking about that. Again, not very complicated. Here I basically just control. So I use one layer beneath it, which is a compressed version, and that's gonna sound something like. Let me turn the volume up a little bit. That's gonna sound something like. Oh God, I don't know if this is gonna be so loud. But yeah, basically like this is gonna be if I just solo this, it's sort of a compressed version, which sounds like it's a little bit underwater, and then I have the normal version, which is just the song. And so what I do is I just, by clicking option on here and clicking option, pressing down option, then clicking, you can create basically a point that you can then change. So I basically just drag it down for certain sections. Like there, for example, I dragged the sound down and then it pushes it into this. And then I clicked on this button here, and then I adjust my keyframes and smooth the keyframes out like this. That's all super simple. All these down. I'll make an in-depth tutorial on sound design in a little bit. But literally just I use ocular sounds, which is how I do all my stuff. Very, very simple. Some traffic sounds that I just brought basically up. Didn't do anything to them. Literally just took them off free websites. Same thing here. Cars crossing in the rain. Just brought them back. Clicked option. Adjusted my things like that. Very, very simple. I'll do an in-depth tutorial on sound design as well for you guys, because people have been asking about that. But yeah, I hope you learned something from that tutorial. I hope that helped in some way. If you have any other questions, DM me, and I'll try and answer as best I can. But thanks so much for the support. And I think we're almost at 2,500 followers, which is like fucking insane. It makes me so happy. Thank you so much. I hope this helped in some way. Yeah, if you have any questions, DM me and I'll respond. Okay.